and welcome to Bury Our Bones with Cinema, the podcast that lives, breathes and dies classic movies, not so classic movies and everything in between. I'm once again joined by the Mark Gatiss to my Steve Pemberton, the amazing Gaz Evans. In today's episode, we are on the hunt for Buffalo Bill with Jonathan Demme's 1991 classic, The Silence of the Lambs. So join us as we search an abandoned storage facility, spend some time with some moth-loving experts, and finally try not to get invited to Dr. Lecter's for a spot of dinner.
This podcast contains spoilers.
So Silence of the Lambs is easily one of my favourites. Definitely in my top 10. It's one that as soon as I was able to get my own DVDs and experience film without the overbearingness of parents, it was one of the first ones that I watched, and since that point it's just gone straight in at Silence of the Lambs is a fantastic movie.
Yeah, I think it's a faultless adaptation of the book. I can't think of anything that they could have done differently that would have made it any better. Yeah, it's ingrained on the culture, it's ingrained on the cinematic psyche. We still talk about it whenever there's a decent serial killer flick out. This and Seven come up in the conversation. They are like the gold standard. And this obviously came before. Yeah, I love watching how it's crafted. And I'm kind of strangely proud of Silence of the Lambs because of Jonathan Demme. Because, he was of the Roger Corman school of directors, like Scorsese and George Armitage and a few of those, came up working for Roger Corman on those low budget horror movies and kind of B movies. And then he'd done Something Wild and he'd done Married to the Mob, which Something Wild especially is really, really good. But then it kind of graduated, if you will, to this. Nobody had any expectations, but I just love that this guy who made one of the most amazing concert movies ever with Stop Making Sense, The Talking Heads, just completely knocked it out apart with this. And, nobody expected anything. But from first shot to last, it amazed me that it was a very jovial, light-hearted family of a cast and crew. I mean, you can see the B-roll footage and there's loads of, it's full of laughter, full of happiness. Maybe it had to be to engage with some of the darkness of this particular story. But I just love that such a masterpiece came out of that and that Jonathan Demme's behind it. I just love that it's him. I really love that it's him.
Yeah, I think it's one of those films where, obviously based on the book by Thomas Harris, but sometimes with book adaptations, they can be good movies, but when comparing to the books, it's like, you need to read the book. It's much better than the film, and it's usually something gets lost in translation.
Yeah.
Obviously, completely different mediums means you have to tell the story in a completely different way, but. I remember when I first read the book and I was surprised because I watched the film before I read the book. And for me, the book or reading has always been quite difficult. Like I find it really difficult to particularly if it's not based on anything. Like I tend to enjoy books if it's based on something so I know what the characters look like so I can picture them. If I have to think of it on my own, then it's really difficult. But I think Silence of the Lambs was one of the first books that I read through choice,
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm not saying it's the first book I ever read. I read books in school and whatnot, but it was the first book where I was like, yeah, I want to read that. And I think I read it in about a week, which for me was quite quickly.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was surprised at how much, even though obviously it's not word for word, page for page, exactly the same. There are things that aren't in the book, that aren't in the film that are in the book and vice versa. But you don't lose anything. The same story is being told. It doesn't, like some adaptations can really kind of lose the essence of what the book was. And this doesn't. And I think going back to Jonathan Demme, without this film, I don't think you get Philadelphia.
No,
you don't get, those other sort of bigger budget. And not bigger budget, sorry, but
more mainstream,
and also quite difficult subject matter. This is this is a really dark movie, but I never feel like it's dark.
No, I think it's more fascinating. And what's amazing about this is, you know, there have been lots of serial killer thrillers and novels and everything. This has got to be amongst the first that is so thoroughly researched. Thomas Harris went to the FBI, went to Quantico, was talking to, what's his name, John, the serial killer profiler guy, the guy who kind of spearheaded
John Douglas.
John Douglas. And, you know, in fact, I mean, Scott Glenn's performance is based off of John Douglas. So this, and the film is filmed in Quantico. I mean, at least the establishing shots certainly are. And, you know, it's got that air of authenticity that not many other films really do, because Thomas Harris went through it. He's a reclusive author. He takes years to write his books, for better or worse, whatever you might think. And so this was the first one. You know, we'd had Psycho, we'd had, you know, Nighthawks and Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And a lot of them are based on the same serial killers that Silence of the Lambs is based on, Buffalo Bill is based on, but none of them have this sense of authenticity. I mean, you feel like you're in the book and the film, you feel you are absolutely in really safe, knowledgeable hands. And that's what makes it chilling, because it's so clear that this is authenticated through the research and through the involvement of John Douglas and all that sort of. And John Douglas, just to remind you, he's, you know, if you've watched Mindhunter on Netflix, the series, and about the origin of the term serial killer, so it's the David Fincher series. This is the guy. This is it's weird to think that the term serial killer didn't actually really get put down on paper until the 60s or 70s, when it was realized that they had these patterns. And so they went and they interviewed all these serial killers and began to profile them so that they could anticipate the moves of any serial killers that were out there. And that's very much what Red Dragon, the first Lecter book, is about. And that's certainly what this one's about. So that's why whenever I watch it, it's chilling, because you know that Thomas Harris has seen the atrocities that are being fictionalized here.
And to just go off of that as well, Scott Glenn was talking about when he was, you know, preparing for the role, and I think he spoke to John Douglas, and he was, you know, speaking about it, and I think John Douglas said, you know, I think Scott Glenn had made a comment of like, I kind of know the world that you're in now. And John Douglas said, no, you haven't experienced the world until you've heard it.
Yeah.
And he apparently showed him a recording of a horrific crime, and that never left Scott Glenn, as you would expect. And I think, you know, going back to what you were saying about, you know, things like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which are, for better or worse, it's more shock value, and it's what I would call firmly has both feet in the horror genre. And whilst this is a horror, the horror for me, and probably most people who watch this, comes from the fact of how utterly believable and realistic everything is. Like the fact that we see Hannibal Lecter, and he's the thing that everybody kind of takes away from it. And there is a lot more to the film, obviously. But if you say Silence of the Lambs to anybody, or Red Dragon, or any of the books, or any of the films, the thing you remember is Hannibal Lecter.
Yeah.
And it's because not just is he absolutely terrifying and totally unhinged, he's incredibly charming. He seems like a person that you would want to have a conversation with, albeit a apprehensive conversation. And I think it's that exploration of, you know, obviously these people are inherently bad and inherently evil, but that's not all of them. There are other sides to them which make them even worse, because they're not just all one thing.
Yeah.
You know, and vice versa. A character like Dr. Chilton, who by the sheer definitions of good and evil is probably more on the good side. He's the guy keeping the people locked up, but there's darker parts to his character. And one of the things that I think stands out the most in this film is how every part is perfectly cast.
Yeah,
absolutely perfectly.
Yeah,
you know, a character like Dr. Chilton, the guy who plays him, let me just get his name up because I always
Anthony
forget.
Held.
Anthony Held, thank you, is unfortunately probably got to the point now where he's typecast in that kind of role. But the reason why is because he's trying to be the charming side of Hannibal Lecter, but it never quite comes off, and it comes across as sleaze, and you can see right through it. Whereas Dr. Lecter, you can't as much, and that's what makes it frightening. Even smaller characters like Barney in this is fantastically cast. You feel like there is a warmth to him. You feel safe in his hands in a place where you probably would never feel safe.
And it does again, having read the book in the last couple of weeks and watched the film, and now watching it's in front of us playing on mute while we talk, just remembering, it really does distill the essence of these characters. That you hear more from Barney, you hear more from Dr. Chilton in the book, of course you do, but it really does distill them down perfectly. You know that Barney is respectful and respected of Lecter and by Lecter. You know that you get the sense that he's been there a long time, but he doesn't let it get to him. The way he encourages Clarice Starling as well. Yeah, and Chilton, the fact that he's rebuffed, the first thing he does with Clarice Starling is hit on her, and then he gets pissed off when she doesn't return his advances. And it's interesting how she gets out of his manipulations by flattering him, yet firmly telling him, no, that's not what I'm here for. This famous scene of Jodie Foster walking down the hall towards Lecter's cell. Again, the way that it's turned into the cinematic language from the page. In the book, she has to stay in the middle of the corridor because there are cells on both sides. It's less kind of dungeon-like. And in the book, Lecter's cell has got bars and this kind of netting. It's almost like mosquito netting that makes it difficult for him to be seen. That's obviously not very cinematic. And to create more of a connection between them, Demme opted instead to have plexiglass between them, which has only added to the iconography of this scene in this film. You just can't imagine it with bars or anything anymore. And the fact that, they couldn't hear each other on the set, so they drilled holes in the plexiglass. And that's crucial because of this whole horrible stuff about how he can smell what she's wearing, smell her skin cream and that sort of stuff. Just the transformation from very, very decent writing in the novel to cinematic language. Just, I love knowing that and seeing how it's been achieved.
Yeah, I mean, that's a totally different skill on top of directing.
Yeah.
Directing is one thing, but then to, translate something from page to screen and from page to screenplay is a whole different skill. And I'm constantly surprised at how just everything fits, everything works. You said the word flawless. And whilst
flawless adaptation, I think so, and we're pretty. And
don't get me wrong. Whilst I don't think there's ever a flawless film, I think this is pretty darn close to it.
Yeah,
there's only a few movies where I would say, that's about as close to perfect and flawless as you're going to get.
Yeah,
there isn't. I mean, there are things that I like about the book that aren't in the film, but it's not as if it makes any kind of difference.
No,
to
and
the film.
we'll probably get into them as we go, but I mean, there are quite a few deleted scenes for this film, and again, most of them are from the book. Most of it has to do with James Gumm's Buffalo Bill's kind of pathology, and but a lot of it doesn't have Clarice Starling in it. And I read or saw Ted Talley, the playwright who won the Oscar for adapted screenplay for Silence of the Lambs, and went on to write the Red Dragon film, funnily enough, when they tried to replicate the success with Red Dragon. But he said that the ultimate goal was that everything in the film, as far as possible, had to be Clarice Starling's perspective. So there's a lot of investigating James Gumm, trying to find out about. There's this whole plot thread about him being rejected from having transsexual surgery, and that's one of the key things that leads them to him. But a lot of that is led by Jack Crawford, by Scott Glenn's character. so it's hinted at, that whole side of things, but because none of that really has Jodie Foster, Clarice Starling at the centre, it was put aside. So the only areas really where Jodie Foster isn't in it is the stuff with James Gunn in the house, and he's kidnapped Catherine Martin, and Lecter's escape. But yeah, otherwise, they just, anything that didn't have to do with keeping her perspective and her walking through this world was excised. They were really, really ruthless with it.
And I think that's probably where I would say you get to the. Whilst I still like Red Dragon and I still enjoy it, it's obviously not a patch on Silence of the Lambs.
No.
And I think probably the biggest reason.
I think it's very watchable, though. I think there's a lot of value to that film.
I think that, it's a very enjoyable movie, but in terms of, obviously we're just watching Dr. Lecter on screen as he looks through the file, and he's just, there's a phrase in wrestling which wrestling fans will know. You may have heard it, Gaz, but for our listeners, it's the phrase is maximize your minutes. And essentially what that means is that you only have a certain amount of time and you've really got to make the most out of that time. Anthony Hopkins, I think, is only on screen for about 17 minutes in this film out of an hour and 58 minutes. That is the definition of maximizing your minutes. He is, for better or worse, he is the thing, as I said earlier, that everybody leaves the theatre remembering. He's the thing that is constantly remembered in pop culture, more so than Clarice Starling. But I think, as I say, the difference is that with Red Dragon, obviously, we follow Will Graham's character, and it tries to do this a similar thing. And it's strange, obviously, because you would think that what with Silence of the Lambs being technically a sequel, okay, in movie terms, it's its standalone version, whilst technically it's the sequel to Manhunter. It's not necessarily linked, and whether you see it as a direct sequel or just an interpretation of the same series, that's up to you. But I think you would expect the second in the iteration or second in the series to perhaps not quite have the same gumption as the first. But actually, I think even with the trilogies, whilst again I like Red Dragon the book, whilst I like Hannibal the book, the best one I think is Silence of the Lambs.
Okay.
And I think obviously they each have their different place, but I think the thing for me why that is because the anchor of it is Clarice, and I absolutely love Clarice's character.
Yeah,
the way she goes from being. It's interesting because Jodie Foster was talking about. I can't remember for the life of me if it's in the book or if it was something they were thinking about doing. But essentially, the opening scene where she's going, she's running and you find out she's doing an assault course and she's working for the FBI. Originally, that was going to be very different. That was going to be, I think, similar to the scene later on where they're doing a mock training session where they do a drugs bust.
Yeah,
they were going to do something similar. However, you wouldn't know it was a training exercise, and she would end up killing the offender, the criminal, and then you'd find out it was a training exercise. And Jodie Foster was like, "I don't like that as an opening.
No.
I feel like we're hoodwinking the audience. We're telling the audience straight away that you can't believe what's on screen, and actually, it needs to be the opposite. You need to believe." You need to be 100% on board with Clarice, and changing it to where at first I think the only thing is if you're paying attention to the subtitles, and you probably would be able to guess, but if you miss it, and even if you see it, it doesn't make much of a difference. You see her running through the woods, you see her, and you kind of think that, okay, is she going to be the victim? Is she going to be, is there somebody chasing her? Because that's what it looks like.
Yeah.
Then slowly you find out, oh no, she's actually doing it. She's training, and obviously in terms of the metaphor, while she's training in general for, her, part of her training to become a qualified special agent. In terms of her character arc, it's her training for meeting Dr. Lecter, albeit she doesn't know she's going to see him yet,
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think, one of the things that I remember the only thing that kind of strikes out a little bit, which I think the film done a better job of, is the backstory for Clarice is ever so slightly different. In the film, her father is a sheriff. In the book, he's a night watchman.
Yeah.
And obviously that's a point of ridicule for Dr. Lecter.
Yeah.
And I think I like the fact that it's not that in there, because I think there's already enough substance for her to feel subconscious about in terms of her upbringing and her coming from a a small country life and that kind of thing. So, and that's what I mean. It's like it knows when to, okay, we need to change that slightly. It makes all the right choices.
Yeah, it certainly does. And I mean, it really, the book finds a really nice balance of feminism, really, and how she is negotiating her way through a very male-dominated world. And there's some more overt conversations in the book, and some of them are replicated in the film, but it does it most brilliantly through cinematic language. From the very beginning, Clarice Starling is dwarfed by men. We see them looking at her, running past while they're all out jogging and training. They look back at her and give her the eyes. She's almost immune to it. She knows it's happening, but she just plows on nevertheless, training, working, studying. All the men, I mean, Jodie Foster is a short actress anyway, but like 5'3" or something. But all the men tower over her. They're deliberately towered. They deliberately cast even taller men. They're bigger. They just dwarf her. When we see her first walking through or rushing to meet Jack Crawford in Quantico, most of the men are kind of walking against her. She's kind of against the tide, swimming against the tide, and everyone else is going the direction opposite to her. And it's just this hum throughout the film. And I like it later when she calls Jack Crawford on it later at the funeral parlor, where, we'll get to eventually, but, she says, and he deliberately isolates her and in a room full of these male sheriffs. And it's an uncomfortable scene. It's uncomfortable for her, and she calls him out on it. And he said, I needed to do that. I needed to get the ball rolling. I needed to get the guy in charge kind of on our side. And he said, it matters. All these men look to you how to act. And he's like, yep, point taken.
And that, that's a really effective scene. You use the word, there's a hum throughout it, and the same in the book. There is an undertone. It's not forced at any point, but you get this very clear sense that she, is in a world that women are not necessarily used to. I think it's a really, really great choice that the only other characters in the book, other than Clarice and I can never remember the character. Delia, who, to be fair, is more of a narrative device more than anything.
Someone to bounce off of.
Yeah. Other than Clarice, the only other women in the film are victims. You've got the senator whose daughter's been kidnapped. She's a victim. Obviously, you've got Catherine as well, who is the kidnappee. She's the only one who's not a victim in this, and she, as you say, working her way through a male-dominated line of work and a male-dominated screen time, she absolutely goes punch to punch with them.
Yeah.
You could opposite, I was about to say Hannibal Lecter's Anthony Hopkins. Anthony Hopkins is Hannibal Lecter. You could so easily get lost in that. A little bit what happens in Hannibal with Julianne Moore.
This is the big flaw of Hannibal, really, one of them.
And there's absolutely nothing wrong with Julianne Moore.
No.
It's just Jodie Foster was so perfect.
And just so iconic, really. And You
could quite easily get lost and, get trapped under the feet of Anthony Hopkins, but she doesn't. And probably partly because it's her perspective, it's her journey, and we just see how the other characters affect that. But because every time she's on scene, you can see you can see that character, the cogs are turning,
Yeah.
you know, in a very different way to when we see Anthony Hopkins and when we see Buffalo Bill.
Yeah.
And I want to go back to Scott Glenn because I think he's one of kind of the unsung heroes of this,
I agree.
this film. I think going back to what I was saying about getting lost, I think with a character like Jack Crawford, it's a very, very fine line between him being, is he too authoritarian? Is he too, you know, the word that's used in the book is stoic.
Yeah.
Is he too stoic? Because otherwise, how do you see that relationship between Clarice and, you know, because at times she kind of not hates him, but she's really frustrated with him. But at times she sees him 100% as that mentor figure. And Scott Glenn's performance is so understated and so...
It's those eyes of his, isn't it? I mean, there's lots of eyes in this film.
Yeah.
And it's just got this deep, dark, kind of brooding sort of thing going on. I mean, in the book, one thing that they didn't even choose to film in the deleted scenes in the book, his wife is dying, and we see a bit of his home life, and his wife is dying and basically catatonic, and does die towards the end of the book, just as the final act starts. But I think they've rightly excised it from the film. Again, it never has anything to do with Starling. And it would have slowed the pace, really.
Yeah, I think it would have made it quite bloated. Whilst I really like that subplot, and I would like to see that subplot in some capacity in this movie, but not at the expense of everything else. I think it adds, because there is a scene in the book where I think it's when she comes back from the first meeting with Dr. Lecter, and she's talking about the report, and he says, did you give him any personal details? Did you speak about me at all? And she says, oh, I said that, you know, I think you can't remember how she describes him, but he says, oh, I said this about you, but that's in the report. And he's like, oh, okay. And Starling's a little bit like, okay, but why is he asking that question? She leaves. And then there's a note from Dr. Lecter, which is a quote from a poem. And then it says, I'm so sorry to hear about Bella, Dr. Lecter.
Yes, yeah.
And that, I think, obviously, that just shows you a little bit more the manipulation of Dr. Lecter. And as I say, I would love to see that, but not at the expense. And that's probably because of Scott Glenn's performance, where it is so understated. There's a line, and I don't quite know why I like it so much, because it doesn't really affect the story, but when he's first telling Clarice about, you know, I want you to go into interview Dr. Lecter, the line where he says, you know, is he drawing? If he is drawing, what's he drawing? The way he delivers that line is really sort of like inquisitive in a really sort of friendly way. And I think, you know, another criticism of Red Dragon is Harvey Keitel's performance as Jack Crawford.
Yeah.
It goes very much into that authoritarian and don't mess with Jack Crawford something. Not that I would mess with Scott Glenn's Jack Crawford, but definitely so with Harvey Keitel.
Yeah.
You know, and then going back to Manhunter, Ed Farina, I believe is his name.
Dennis Farina,
Ed Farina, who I always remember as Cousin Avi from Snatch. Completely different performance again, almost a bit too laid back.
It's interesting.
And obviously Lawrence Fishburne in the TV series.
Oh, I'd forgotten about that.
Which, from memory, was quite good, but obviously,
I stuck with that. I've always been fascinated with this world and with these characters. Silence of the Lambs is where they absolutely nailed it, because it comes down to Lecter ultimately. Lecter still here more well. He's still a supporting character. So in Manhunter / Red Dragon, he's completely incarcerated. He manages to affect the outside world by manipulating a phone call, and it all goes to pot. And the book Red Dragon ends very, very badly for Will Graham. In the film Red Dragon with Edward Norton, it doesn't. They tidy up and wrap the ending in a bit of a bow. Although there are some ways in which the ending of Red Dragon improves upon the book, I think. But here, and in Hannibal, he's completely free. And that's where I found him far less scary in Hannibal, both the book and the film. It was a different beast, that book. It was really unwieldy. Starling by this time, it's a good 10 years later from what I remember. She's grizzled. She's now kind of the Crawford type character, really. She's the one who's seen it all and been around the block and kind of been through the mill. But here is the perfect thing. For the most part, Lecter is incarcerated and still a supporting character, but also he gets set free. Well, he escapes. And that's the sweet spot, I think. A bit of him incarcerated, a bit of him out on the loose, and that's terrifying enough. By the time we get to Hannibal, and then eventually Hannibal Rising, I think is kind of lost its fascination. It moves away from the psychological stuff, the books, to more kind of gothic romance, grand guignol, kind of just really gory, outlandish stuff, and it loses that psychological underpinning that made Red Dragon and Silence of the Lambs such amazing books.
Yeah, because essentially, Red Dragon and Silence of the Lambs are pretty much the same film.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same premise, it's the same setup.
Yeah.
It's just different characters and different situations. Whereas obviously Hannibal, as you say, is it's a different world. We haven't seen what Lecter's. We briefly see it at the beginning of Red Dragon, but not properly. We see it, and it goes to the point where as soon as Hannibal Lecter becomes more of a main character,
yes,
it's less interesting because
we're
we're seeing all of these things. We're not left to the imagination.
Yeah.
I like in Silence of the Lambs and in Red Dragon to a certain extent. We see the effects of what he's done, but we don't actually see how he done it. And as soon as we see how he done it, it loses that air of mystery.
Yeah.
I think one thing I like about the TV show from memory, although it has been a long time since I've seen it, is it does kind of the opposite. We see him in everyday life, and we see him and his darker side, but we never really see him up until the latter stages of the third season. We never really see him as we know him in the films.
Yeah.
It's different guys. It's him still hiding himself.
Yeah.
And so and I think Mads Mikkelsen is a great performance, but for completely different reasons.
Yeah, I don't know if he gets the terror. He's in the Hannibal the series with Mads Mikkelsen. You always imagine it'd be quite a nice, pleasant evening being killed and eaten by him. So, sorry, I'm sounding like Armie Hammer now, aren't I?
Don't panic, say that for Christ's sake.
But with Hopkins here, I know that this film has been parodied to death, and it has been, by French and Saunders.
Which is a great parody.
It is. The Loaded Weapon movie with F. Murray Abraham. Silence of the Hams was a movie, believe it or not. But when you go back to it and you strip all that away, it is still absolutely terrifying. And Hopkins, one of my favourite bits there's a couple of bits at Hopkins, and neither of them are in the book in the same way, is where, Jack Crawford sent a trainee to me. The look of absolute just horror that he would be treated with such menial disrespect is absolutely hilarious. And the bit later, why do you think he removes their skins, Agent Starling? Thrill me with your acumen. I love his ego and his faux indifference, and it's much more charming and terrifying behind that glass. When it's out in the open, when it's out in Hannibal, it just it loses its fun and its terror and its threat, really.
Yeah,
because he's just another guy out on the loose. He's just another slasher. Then I think there's more to it, and there's obviously the contentious ending of Hannibal, which I quite like, actually. The book I'm talking about, where ultimately through a combination of drugging and hypnosis, they basically become a couple by the end of it, and that has really annoyed 99% of people. They changed the ending in the film, but it meant the film basically was valueless because it ends where it begins, with Hannibal on the loose and kind of Clarice doing what she's doing. So that wasn't a solution either. But I prefer the book ending. But I think by then, with Hannibal the book, of course, you are envisioning Jodie Foster as you read it, even before and after the film was released. And it just doesn't marry up as the same character, I guess, is not what you want for her, because you've seen her grow and grow as a person, as a woman, as a investigator, as a professional throughout all this Silence of the Lambs, the book and the film. And then Hannibal goes and arguably just undoes all of that, really, and reduces her to a victim ultimately again. Although it's arguable to what extent, she desires this ultimate relationship with Hannibal by the end of the book. Yeah, it's not. Yeah, it's intriguing, really, but it's endlessly fascinating.
Yeah, and I mean, there are things that I do love about Hannibal as well. As you say, I am fascinated with the whole series, and actually, if there's anything ever, I'm going to watch it because the characters are so interesting, albeit who's playing the characters is personal preference and personal choice. But, Mason Verger in Hannibal.
Yeah, I like him.
Gary, I mean, between me and Jim, every my brother-in-law, every time we see each other and, somebody asks how much is it or whatever, it's like $5,000, it's, that's a very memorable character. And I wonder, I think Hannibal has a point where it's almost, there's a little bit too much. There's a little bit, the magic formula is you have the killer incarcerated, you have the killer on the loose, and you have the go-between. That's on the back of the book, or the version I have.
The other issues as well were the rights issues behind the scenes. The character of Clarice Starling is tied up in all kinds of copyright issues, and that's why later films were not able to kind of use her in that way. That's why Hannibal the series, doesn't feature even a mention of Starling, not a direct one anyway. And so ultimately the Will Graham character comes back, and the end, I don't know if they knew that they were going to be done after 3 seasons, but the ending has the Lecter and Graham basically becoming one, and more or less ending in the same kind of going in the same direction as Hannibal the book. There was a short-lived series called Starling, wasn't there?
Yes, there was, and I think that anything about
I don't know if that had anything to do with Hannibal Lecter whatsoever. There's all sorts of things that mean they have to tiptoe around the characters and that sort of stuff, which makes it awkward. But yeah, nobody even remembers that. I had to look it up and remind myself.
I mean, what are your thoughts on Manhunter?
Yeah,
I mean, the thing for me that makes totally different is that it's 100% an 80s movie.
Yeah, it's a bit cringy in places.
In that,
and I mean, it's difficult. I mean, I think Manhunter only kind of really, I remember the VHS era and not really realizing that Manhunter had anything to do with it until Silence of the Lambs made the character just a household name. And then I think that they probably would have given Manhunter another boost. But then there's the complication that, the character is different, played by Brian Cox in a very interesting way, although not, I think people do say, oh yeah, the real Hannibal Lecter is Brian Cox. I think that's just ingenuous. I think it's a very good performance.
I think that only comes from he's the first on the screen.
So you feel obligated just to look cool to say that it's Brian Cox. But I don't think it's true. But because there's been so many years of parody of Hannibal Lecter, and he's used as a punchline now. But when you go back to Silence of the Lambs, his performance is brilliant, and I think it's the definitive Lecter. But unfortunately, I mean, Jodie Foster said no, Jonathan Demme said no, Ted Talley said no to the sequel to Hannibal. Only Anthony Hopkins did, and we know now that Anthony Hopkins doesn't have the best quality control when it comes to starring in movies. But fair play to him. I mean, he made the character his own, and of course he's going to carry on with it.
I can understand it because there's a lot of directions to go. There's a lot of You know, there's a lot to explore there.
And it's a fun character to play.
100%. You know, it's goes back to, you know, a wrestling analogy where everybody likes to be the bad guy because you've got so many more options.
Yeah.
It's that kind of thing. I think, you know, with Manhunter, one thing I do, it's hard to make a decision about whether Brian Cox is good in Manhunter because it's so blink and you'll miss it. He's in one scene.
Yeah, true.
You know, they really develop it in Red Dragon. You know, and it's been a long time since I've read Red Dragon. So I can't remember if Hannibal Lecter is in it as much as he is in the 2003 version, or if he's in it as much as the Manhunter version.
He's certainly in it more than the Manhunter.
Yeah, because I remember, you know, I think, you know, speaking to people, say, oh, if you've seen Manhunter, yeah, you've got to go and see that as well. That'd be really interesting to watch. So I watched it and was like, oh, is that literally it? Well, I can't really make an opinion. He's in one scene and it's, you know, it's a bit kind of, it almost throws Dr. Lecter away as a character, which it's going the opposite way, where this has got the sweet spot. You see enough of him to be intrigued, but not so much that you go, I'm not bothered by him anymore. Yeah. You know, Manhunter, it's like he feels very much like we're watching the scene where they're just about to do the autopsy on one of the bodies. He feels like one of the characters in that, in the sense of he's there for the function of the scene and then that's it.
Oh, just, you know, those three shots there, Scott Glenn Crawford puts the vapor rub under his nose, chucks it to the coroner, to Ray, and then there's that lovely kind of fast track in on his face, so we really see what it means to put that there. And then chucks it to Starling, and just that little look she gives, that little kind of timid sort of, you know, I'm a woman kind of surrounded by men and doing something quite intimate that's going to perhaps make me look a little bit silly. It's to do with the face, to do with the makeup, and the way she turns away. The camera doesn't follow her. It stays, and we just see the back of her head. And it's just little moments like that just, rather than dialogue, taking this kind of feminist approach, and just this character approach, which is great. Her performance here, as she's looking at the body, we don't ever really fully see the body, and that's what's terrifying about it. But just though, man, her performance is brilliant. The way she is looking,
and you know, for her character, the fact that she's pretty much the only one in that room, bearing in mind she's the least experienced in that room. She's the only one who, as soon as she looks, other than to meet somebody else's gaze, she's focused. She looks, she doesn't turn away. You can see that initial, okay, this is what we're working with. This is the, you know, the brutality and the horrificness of this killer. Yeah. But she doesn't shy away.
No.
All of the others shy away, especially when, I can't remember his name, but the guy who opens up the body bag. Yeah. Oh, straight away.
Lord Almighty, and just avoiding and just depersonalizing straight away. It's well, to be fair, I'm sure they would have got round to it eventually, but she's the one that spots the fingernail polish. Yeah. She's the one that spots the kind of the chrysalis in the throat.
And it's a great way of, there's a scene in the book that isn't in the film, or at least I don't think it is. If I've missed it, then I've missed it. But it encapsulates everything about that scene in a very quick way, in the sense of, there's a bit in the book where she's asking Jack Crawford, send me.
Yes.
You know, send me. And she says, I'm a woman. Yeah. I will walk into a room and see 10 things that you won't see.
Precisely.
And it's that, you know, that it's that way of showing that, you know, it's.
Yeah, that's a deleted scene. Yeah, they talk in the book. You know, she says, I mean, if I walk, so it comes to the point where she's been kicked off the case because there's a bit more with Senator Martin in the book, and she's been looking around Catherine's bedroom, found some illicit pictures that Catherine's taken, and it's led to a bit of animosity, to say the least. And Starling is basically kicked off. And she says, well, look, just let me go to Belvedere, Ohio. Let me see the very first victim's bedroom. Let me try and get a sense of what's going on here. And it's a brilliant call because she ends up finding the, all the dresses and the darts for the measuring the back of dresses. And she realizes, God, he's not only is he making a suit out of young women's skin, but he is a trained seamer, basically. He knows how to sew, and that gives us another thing to go on. But yeah, she the book says, I can't remember if she says it or if it's in the prose, but it's she knew that there wasn't a single female agent working full time on this case, even though all the victims are women. And she knew that if she goes into the bedrooms of these young girls, these young women, she would instantly know 3 times more than any male counterpart because she's had those bedrooms and she thinks in that way. So yeah, they make it more overt. It is a deleted scene. By that time, what I think they're gearing up to is the big house switcheroo, which is done in the book. All of a sudden, Starling's at the house and it's like, she stumbled upon him. She doesn't realize it, but she stumbled upon it. But in the film, it is the most famous example of parallel editing in history.
Yeah.
How to do it so effectively.
Yeah, I think it is slightly more effective in the film just because there's less to go on, isn't there?
Yeah.
We're only going from a visual perspective, whereas in the book, obviously, it does it very well, don't get me wrong, but it obviously explains it a lot more.
Yeah.
But I think it goes back to what we were saying about, having that transition from book to screenplay and to screen. Obviously they filmed that scene, but they still had an element of keeping that same character trait in
They've
there.
got to keep the character.
You literally do not lose anything, even though scenes aren't in there.
It would have been useful and quite, empowering to have that scene in there, but they're thinking about pace, they're thinking about what comes next, they're thinking about lulling the audience into a false sense of security. Oh, they found out that James Gunn lives in Chicago, so Jack Crawford takes the FBI SWAT team or whatever over to Chicago, although in the book he doesn't go. By this time his wife has died and he doesn't go on that. So that's another improvement, I think. And so, and Starling, meanwhile, is just idly kind of interviewing the people who knew the very first victim. And she's not realized that actually, she doesn't realize it, but she's doing the stuff that is going to catch him. So, yeah, I think they took that out because they're just got to move the pieces in place for the finale.
Yeah.
That's why some people kind of complain. There's the bit, I'm getting ahead of myself a bit, but they complain a bit about, when Crawford realizes that they're in the wrong house in Chicago, and meanwhile Starling is over in Ohio. How does he know that she's in danger? How does Jack Crawford realizes that they're in the wrong house? They got the wrong house, and then all of a sudden there's that fast track in, and he's like, Clarice. It's like, how does he know exactly where she is and why she might be in danger? But that is spelled out in the book. They gloss it over in the film.
I think for me, the way I see that is I see it more of he has every faith in Clarice's ability to get to the, to get to the truth and get to the, and to tie this investigation up. And I think for me, how I've always interpreted that is, well, if they're in the wrong house and we've got it wrong, then Starling has to have got it.
Yeah.
That's how I've always looked at it.
True. Yeah, and that is the correct answer. But it is explained more in the deleted scenes. So yeah, but yeah, if that was in it, then people would be a lot clearer, I guess. But yeah,
I mean, going on because the budgets for this film and the box office, this was obviously a absolute smash hit success.
Oh yeah,
which very almost wasn't the case because they were considering. How long they were considering this for, I don't know, but there was certainly at some point a consideration to make this a direct-to-video release. because Manhunter flopped.
Yeah.
And they were like, well, we don't know if there's any scope in this for, you know, we don't know if audiences want to see more of this world. Okay, the book's successful, but do people want to see more of this? And so it had a budget of $20 million, which is a substantial budget for 1991. Opening weekend, $13.7 million made back, so very successful early on. I believe it made its full budget back in 1 week in the cinema, in the theatres. Domestically, it grossed $130.7 million, and worldwide $275 million. So very, very successful. And just to adjust that for today's figure, so that made worldwide around about $650 million, which very much, if this was released today and it was as successful, very much in that, you know, Marvel numbers, you
it's
know,
like the minimum you'd expect for a Marvel movie nowadays.
Comic book movie type numbers. Okay, yes, they're made with a much bigger budget, but still, it just shows you how successful this movie was. Which, considering they had just about enough faith to make it, you know, a theatre showing, but they almost went direct to video, and that would have been, I think, well, obviously, I think it would have become more of a cult. Classic.
But and that's true. Yeah. And I mean, Jodie Foster, she had won an Academy Award for The Accused.
Yeah.
She'd been in Taxi Driver and lots of things, but maybe it was still kind of, she says herself in interviews that the reason she pursued this part, because it was going to go to Michelle Pfeiffer. But she pursued this part because she was kind of sick of playing victims. And she liked the idea of being a woman in this world, and it is the woman who saves the day, who saves the kidnapped girl at the end of it, which was relatively unheard of at the time. And so she'd won an Oscar, but it was for a very adult, dark courtroom thriller. So she got some attention, but it wasn't a mega star, if you would. And Anthony Hopkins is difficult to imagine, but back then he didn't really have a presence in America.
Yeah, this was his sort of like last hurrah at trying to make it in America. And if this hadn't have been successful, I think he would have gone far more UK based or even theatre based. You know, obviously he'd been in things like The Elephant Man and others, but he wasn't none. As far as I'm aware, none of the people in this film were surefire banker hits. No.
It was going to be Gene Hackman. He actually had the rights to the book. He was going to play Lecter, but then found the script to be too violent, and he just simply didn't want to do it. Which is bizarre, because I mean, it's no more or less violent than the film. Sorry, than the book. Well, actually. Well, when Lecter escapes and he kind of ties up one of the officers and, you know, disembowels him and puts his spine out through the front, that actually isn't in the book. In the book, when he kills the two officers, he leaves them on the floor. Well, leaves one of them on the floor, leaves the other one, of course, on the top of the elevator. But yeah, that is an extra flourish, which pushes credulity a bit. It's like, how much time have you got to, you know, take someone's face off, dress in their clothes, put them on an elevator, and then display this other guy kind of from the top of a cage, you know, and position the backlighting in this really erratic way. It's like, well, you have 10 minutes in this apparently very kind of highly secure building.
That's the suspension of disbelief moment in the film, isn't it?
So maybe that was one of the bits that put Gene Hackman off, but ultimately it all worked out for the best. I mean, you can't, I mean, I know it's a bit of a cliche to say, but you really can't imagine anyone else in these roles. And maybe it's because, I mean, they say it in all the interviews and all the supporting kind of promotional footage. This is the absolute kind of synchronicity of perfect director, perfect writer, perfect book, perfect casting, perfect moment.
Which going to, you know, there's a lot of things here that were potential for things to not align and not to sync up with each other. You know, the fact that you're converting it from a book is a tricky thing to do. The fact that you've already had a film where maybe not established characters, but if people are aware of it, they will go, oh, well, that's not William Peterson. You know, obviously we don't have Will Graham here, but that's not Brian Cox, or that's not Dennis Farina. there's that element to it. There's the fact of none of these people are bankable stars. You hear about things like The Shawshank Redemption, which is an amazing movie, but didn't really do that well at the box office. And that had bankable stars or stars who were more bankable at that point in their careers.
That took off on video, didn't it?
Yeah, and the fact that this is the second in a series and this is being presented as, whilst it's difficult. Obviously, it is a sequel to Manhunter, but it's not set in the same universe. If that makes sense. It's a different interpretation. It's a reset. It's it's certainly a reset.
I mean, they didn't mention Manhunter, and it's not like in the trailer. First, he helped Will Grant, but now there's none of that in the, at least as far as I remember. I mean, it did so poorly and was such an afterthought, Manhunter, which since has become far more obviously kind of revered.
And I don't think it flopped because it was a bad movie. I think I believe it came out in the summer. And
they had to change the name as well because it was coming out at the same time as Year of the Dragon, the Mickey Rourke movie. So that's why they changed it to Manhunter, which is a very generic title, a very forgettable kind of straightforward thriller title. Silence of the Lambs is far more distinctive. So yeah.
Which is, for viewers of the movie, isn't really addressed in why it's called that.
No.
But obviously in the book, it's a reference to, I believe it's a reference to Clarice and how she comes from a farm background.
Yeah.
And because there's the very last line of the book, essentially the last line is the silence of the lambs. I'm not describing it in any way, shape or form that is legible to anybody listening, but that's addressed in the book, but isn't addressed here. And I think it has, as you say, more intrigue, and you go, oh, what's that about? Nobody thinks this is going to be about farming or about lambs, but it's a bit more of a, I do prefer those titles where it's a little bit more metaphoric as opposed to, just emblazoned and, so obviously we haven't really sort of spoken about Ted Levine or Levine. I'm never sure how you pronounce it.
I think Levine.
That's how I've always pronounced it, but I have heard people say Levine. But Ted Levine is absolutely, in a completely different way to Anthony Hopkins, absolutely terrifying.
Yeah.
As Buffalo Bill. Obviously he has a very deep timbre of his voice anyway.
Yeah.
And he only lets that out in certain bits.
Yes, yeah.
And we're just coming up to the scene where Catherine is at the bottom of the well and she's screaming, and he mimics the screaming. And that is one of the scenes, other than obviously the first meeting between Clarice and Dr. Lecter, one of the scenes that sticks with me because it's just a really quick and easy way, without lots of exposition, without lots of dialogue, of showing this guy is a little bit unhinged.
A little bit is putting it mildly. Well, yeah, I mean, the very famous scene, it puts the lotion on its skin. So these impersonal pronouns, he's completely disassociating this person from humanity. There's a really creepy bit in the book where Harris describes what James Gumb is looking at in the well, and he takes his perspective and he describes Catherine as the material. Yeah. And as like, oh God, that's gross. Imagine thinking that about someone. Yeah, the material. She's just simply a resource for his suit, his skin. Oh, that creeps me out. Not much creeps me out, but that did. Yeah, it's that kind of dissociation. Yeah. Yeah. And I think just changing the subject ever so slightly, this is a film filled with great iconography. That The Mask is one of probably the most well-known movie props you'll ever get. The Death Hawk moth. Yeah. Which actually I don't think in reality the Death Hawk moth has that pattern on the back of its head. Oh.
I think they kind of took the Deathhawk moth because of the size of it, and then put like an interpretation of Salvador Dali painting.
Yeah.
So, but obviously we're just seeing Hannibal Lecter in that hockey mask, which is, we've already got one iconic hockey mask with Jason Voorhees.
Yeah.
And so
that takes a bit of balls,
to
doesn't
take
it?
that and go, oh, sorry, you're going to do what? Look, you can't. People just think he's Jason Voorhees. And they, to stick with that and go, no, this will work. And the fact that you can only see his, the top half of his head and his eyes and, the use of Anthony Hopkins' eyes is, in terms of eye acting, about as good as you'll get. Great slow zoom.
I never liked that exhale he does. That I thought that's a bit. I don't like that. I don't like that.
It kind of takes away a little bit from his master of manipulation, always in control.
Yeah,
it just sounds like he's got asthma.
We get it. Your mind is racing, sort of thing, but we don't need that. This is interesting, the Senator Martin thing, because in the book, weirdly, they actually part way on much better terms.
Yeah,
she has far more of an issue with Clarice Starling than she does with Lecter, and he's far more helpful. And he's not as nasty as he is in this. Talking about her little girl on the slab. That's not in the book. Yeah, they actually have a reasonably productive conversation, and I like the bit, because Chilton kind of presents it. She goes, "Senator Martin, here is Hannibal Lecter," and the book talks about how in that instant she realised that she was dealing with a fool, and it's like, oh, that's good.
Yeah, it's I keep going back to it because it is really, really astute filmmaking. They could have left that the same way, and obviously it would have changed ever so slightly the latter stages of the film, but they've made a decision to deviate from the book in a way that doesn't infringe on where the book is going and where
that's true, actually.
You hear all the time about, the ending of that book is completely different. They've done that. I don't like what. Whereas here, they've made changes. It is pretty faithful. Don't get me wrong. They trim the fat a little bit.
Yeah,
but there are changes, and somehow it's still, whether or not you think the book is better than the film or the film is better than the book. Either way, they are both fantastic pieces of work.
Yeah.
And I think it's purely personal preference, which is sometimes goes against everything, that something is telling you. One thing can be better, but you prefer something else. So it's so surprising. And that's what I mean. Every time I watch this film, it's like almost like I'm watching it for the first time again, because I'm surprised at how good it is. And, you pick up something ever so slightly different every single time. One thing I do want to talk about is you have in the scenes with Senator Martin, there's a character by the name of Paul Krendler, who for years and years and years, I had no linkage to the fact that is recast in Hannibal as Ray Liotta.
Yeah.
And whilst I don't dislike the actor in The Silence of the Lambs, I think it's just because Ray Liotta I have a massive soft spot for.
Oh, well, I mean, Krendler is a much bigger part of the Hannibal
obviously.
book.
In here, he's just he's that knobhead who thinks he's higher than he is and using his power.
Yeah. And a lot of the deleted scenes of Silence of the Lambs, funnily enough, surround him and the whole process of getting Starling away from the case. There's a lot more about getting Starling to Memphis, whether or not that's a good idea, how she's going to get past Krendler and all that sort of stuff. There's much more of that in the book, but they sidestep a lot of that, which would have just bogged the film down at this point. So there's a little bit of like, oh, I'm going to keep my head down as I go. And she's collected Lecter's paintings from Barney, and which is another deleted scene.
It's a lot more subtext with Rumvoiter's Krendler. But yeah, I've always had a soft spot for Ray Liotta because he kind of reminds me of my uncle.
Yeah.
So whenever when you put Ray Liotta in pretty much anything, I'll go and watch that. I do want to talk about two things whilst we're on the scene where they have the makeshift cell for Dr. Lecter
Yeah.
in what I believe is actually a district attorney's office
Right.
in, I can't remember where, but not the actual office, but it's in the same building.
Yeah.
The first thing is one of the guards, who I like to call him the head guard, has an absolutely cracking tash. Like,
yes.
in a film where there's a lot of iconography, he has this really sort of distinctive moustache, which is a bold move, I think, and it just always sticks with me. I always go, oh, it's a dude with a great tash. Secondly, I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, but there is the most batshit crazy cameo from singer-songwriter Chris Isaac.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it just seems like it's almost Ed Sheeran in Game of Thrones-esque.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
not to this, obviously it doesn't drag the film down like Ed Sheeran did in Game of Thrones, but it's so off the wall and like, why the hell is Chris Isaac in this?
Yeah.
You know, it's such
it's Jonathan Demme. Well, he's got cracking taste in music. He directed Stop Making Sense, which gives him a pass for life, of course. May he rest in peace. But so he knows his music and he knows that world. So Chris Isaac was a friend of his. And so, like, hey, do you want to be the SWAT leader? Roger Corman, of course, plays the head of the FBI, his protege. I mean, Corman responsible for so many, you know, Scorsese, De Palma, Coppola, you know, responsible for the beginnings of so many people's careers. It is just a workshop of creativity, and so many people owe Roger Corman a debt. So he's in there. Apparently, quite a few people in the crew have got little bits and pieces to do here and there. It was a very family kind of feel orientated kind of cast and crew, apparently. And Demme has said in an interview I saw that, you know, even the most minute background extra or character, he tried his very best to cast very interesting faces and distinctive kind of looks. And that's true. I mean, you look at the SWAT team that are about to come up the stairs later, and you know they're all very, very distinctive looking, and yeah, it works.
You know, a real bunch of characters.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, you know, and
why not?
And to be totally honest with you, there's nothing wrong with just casting random people in things, but actually it goes back to that thing of really wanting to make this film work, and not that anybody goes in making a film and going, oh, whatever. Everybody tries, obviously, but this attention to detail, things that actually you could put anybody in those roles and it wouldn't really matter, but to do and go that extra effort just ups it an extra notch. And it's such a novel thing to have a lot of small part characters each feel like characters and not feel like interchangeable. You know, this scene is perhaps my favourite scene. Yes, you have to suspend your disbelief.
Yeah.
Can he get all of this done in 10 minutes?
Yeah.
But I absolutely love it. And
it's like Jaws.
Yeah.
For the first hour or so, you don't see the shark. When you see the shark, without context, yes, it looks like a big rubber turd, whatever. But Spielberg in Jaws has made you absolutely convinced of this shark. That when you actually I've shown that film to a lot of students in the film club I run at school. It's the one film I show every single year without fail. None of the kids are like, God, it's such a fake shark. They are gripped. They're absolutely into it. And I think you could say it's the same with Lecter's escape. It's preceded by this amazing scene between Lecter and Starling as she reveals, you know, the silence of the lambs. But it's basically a metaphor for her, you know, a terrible trauma, and she's trying to find Catherine, and that will put all that sort of stuff to bed. And I love how the shooting by Tak Fujimoto is amazing. He went on to work on like a lot of Shyamalan stuff and everything like that. His cinematography here is great. And, you know, almost imperceptibly, as they're having this conversation, you realise that the bars have disappeared. It's like, oh God, all of a sudden you realise they might as well be like 2 inches from each other, face to face. So good. And nobody does characters looking into the camera like Jonathan Demme.
Yeah, it's such an intimate movie.
Ah, man.
It's so I keep saying it's the thing that I remember. I think, obviously, I remember an awful lot about this movie, as anybody listening will know and have figured out by now. But the intimacy of this movie is so, you feel like you are there because they're looking directly into the camera and therefore into your eyes.
Yeah.
When Clarice is doing it, you feel very, you feel her, you have an empathetic feel to her. And, when Lecter's doing it, it puts you on edge. You feel like you're being hunted.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the things that Anthony Hopkins done very well, whether it was a conscious choice. I think it may have been. He treats Hannibal Lecter like a predator.
Yeah.
He is, he's not a human. He is an animal. He is a predator. The leering forward in that scene where it's almost like a cat waiting to pounce on its prey. It's so...
But, he wells up. It's like... and the way he looks away and softly blinks, it's like he's tasting her trauma, It's like, I don't know, there's something about it.
Yeah, and I think that's the first kind of inklings where we kind of... Obviously, we know at this point he can't attack Clarice, but it's one of the first kind of inklings where we kind of see where it develops in Hannibal, where he doesn't want to attack Clarice.
No.
He doesn't want to go for Clarice. Whilst he's fully aware that he's making her feel uneasy and he knows exactly what he's doing, he doesn't feel, no, that's the point where we go, okay, well, maybe Clarice is slightly safe. And obviously when he does escape, for the rest of the film, he doesn't go after her, which is kind of what everybody's expecting.
Well, I don't know,
to
actually. I really don't know, because he knows very well that she's being used by Crawford and that she's in the middle of all of it and she's trying her best and everything. I never, ever got the sense that she was in danger. And it's one of the first things she says in the film and the book, once they realise that he's escaped, he's like, I know he won't come after me. He'd consider it rude. I think that's what's hilarious about... I love that. Barney's safe as well. Yeah, Barney never gets attacked.
When I say that's what we expect, what I mean is from watching other movies in the same genre, that we're expecting he's going to go, okay, he's escaped, he's going to go straight after Clarice. That'll be the final act. He's going after Clarice. Yeah. And obviously, people who've read the book prior to this won't be surprised. And the film kind of gives you those nods, but it's a nice, that's the wrong word. It's a surprising ending where those same tropes that you expect, that you've seen before, it happens, not from Hannibal Lecter, but it happens in Manhunter and Red Dragon, where the killer then goes after Will Graham's character. Obviously, it does kind of happen, but it's more because he's been caught and, Clarice has found Buffalo Bill. Yeah. But going back to the intimacy of it, even when obviously you could understand totally just having those intimate moments between Hannibal Lecter and Clarice Starling, because that's the relation, or one of the relationships that kind of propels the story forward, and is the kind of, I would say the most intriguing relationship, is how Clarice clearly, obviously, knows Hannibal Lecter is dangerous, but I think there is a part of her who understands the charmingness and understands the not necessarily likable aspects of his character, but understands how people can be hoodwinked. And is very aware of not being hoodwinked herself. Yeah. You can understand having those close up and those, directly right down the barrel of the camera. You can understand those scenes being that, but it does it obviously when Jack Crawford and Starling first. I think what's interesting in the early parts of the film where you do have that, Jack Crawford looks directly down the camera. Yeah. Starling is just off center. Yes. Just off center, so she's not quite looking down the camera, and it's that slow switch where. At that point, we feel like she's probably quite nervous. She's in the company of a senior figure at the FBI who she looks up to, and then slowly as the film goes on, she starts looking down the barrel of the camera more, and you see that character, even from a simple thing of where her eyes are placed. That's such a subtle move,
Yeah.
but makes such a difference. And we are now just seeing Anthony Hopkins have a little nibble on the nose of one of the guards. And why I like this scene so much is because it's the first proper taste of what Dr. Lecter is capable of. It's been mentioned, we've seen the effects of it, but at no point have we actually seen it. And the way that the beating of the guard with the nightstick is, and the way the blood just splatters over him, and we're just watching. We're not watching the guard. We're watching Anthony Hopkins. That's about as terrifying as you get in this movie.
I loved seeing people's reactions in the cinema. Just the first time this came out, it must have absolutely terrified people.
And and obviously we've seen more gruesome things. We've seen more things that push the envelope.
Yeah.
But I think this film is more about what you don't see.
Yeah,
and
you see just how his calmness with it as well. In the film, and earlier it's mentioned that it's actually taken from Red Dragon. Funnily enough, the bit earlier where Starling has shown the Polaroid of the damage he's done to that nurse's face, and ripped her tongue out and one of her eyes and all that sort of stuff in a split second, and that his pulse never raises above whatever's and that it's the same here. It's just very, very and
the fact that after he's killed the guards, he goes and plays his tape player and just listens to music, and he
finishes off,
sways his hand left and right like he's conducting. It really does show you that calmness and that that calculated element of him. And as soon as I've said it before on the podcast, and it's a phrase that I probably overuse, but as soon as you feel like, okay, we're probably getting into the realms of we've seen too much, it stops and it takes us back seat and we go somewhere else and we see something else. I think, the problems with Hannibal and, probably Hannibal Rising from memory, you see too much. You see, whilst there is a soft spot for that scene at the end of Hannibal, spoiler alert, where he takes Krendler's top of his skull off and feeds him a piece of his own brain. It is utterly ridiculous. It's a very how can I put it? It feels very Vincent Price in that, type
that's
villain. It gets to that point, and the beauty of Silence of the Lambs is that it never quite feels hokey. It never feels like it's, doing something perhaps other than when we see the body, up on the bars like an angel, and he's been gutted. Never feels like it's doing something just to be cool, just to be and obviously the switcheroo with
I'd be intrigued. That's another thing I wish I knew, is whether people were convinced that whether people when you look at it now, you look at the camera work, and in a second a very slow track in on the cop / Hannibal's body, you realize that's basically saying, this is Hannibal. Basically, that's what it's saying. But I wonder if people believe that, or wanted to believe that, or were expected to believe that, if that was the preferred reading initially. So you've got the excitement of, I don't know whether they're going for the mystery of, oh God, this poor guy, where's Hannibal? Or if they're going for, this is Hannibal, we know it, they don't, let's see what happens when they finally realize, here's the shot. So it's like, this is where it's like, that's Hannibal.
It's just a little question mark, isn't it?
Yeah, it's too much attention given to a minor character.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, I wonder how much of that is because we know what's coming. I unfortunately cannot remember my reaction when I first saw it.
No.
In that element, because I wonder if, if we watched, if I showed Hannah this, she has seen it, but she will say she hasn't seen it. I think she probably fell asleep, like she does with most amazing films that I show her that aren't musicals.
Blasphemy.
Somebody who hasn't seen this, doesn't know what's coming, doesn't know the books, doesn't really know anything. I wonder how much they would see that coming.
Oh, we're inured to these sorts of twists nowadays, anyway.
It's kind of
yeah.
it's kind of a trope of the thriller / horror genre, isn't it?
Yeah.
You expect a twist, you expect some sort of camera trickery, and which is why that scene that you mentioned earlier, where parallel shooting with Starling going to Buffalo Bills and Crawford and the FBI going to the wrong address or what they think is the right address. That's why that's so effective, because at that point, had it been done before, I'm not sure. I can't think of a place where it's been done before. Now we've seen it done quite a lot. It's almost, as soon as you've got characters going one place and somebody else going somewhere else, you expect that now. At that point, it still works, and that tash on that dude is just I absolutely love it, because what you were saying earlier about everybody has a distinctive look, everybody feels like a character, and I've always loved that guy with a tash, and I've never seen him in anything else, unfortunately, and I'm probably now going to go into a deep dive of his back catalogue and see if that's a tash he used purely for this, or if that's just him, a little bit like Tom Selleck in where it's become a bit of a signature. If he shaves it off, he looks completely different. So at this point, with the body on the top of the elevator, this is the kind of the first point where we're starting to go, hang on a minute, something's not quite right. This is now probably where we're starting. Hang on a minute, why is Lecter on the top of the lift in a prone position, not moving? Now we're starting to question, where's this going? I like the fact, in the book it's slightly different. Rather than shooting him in the back of the leg, he says, if you don't move, I'm going to drop a stun grenade. Yeah. So it's ever so slightly different. I think it's slightly better in the film. It's a little bit more, it shows.
Yeah, it's another that can't be him. That can't be him.
Yeah, either it can't be him, or somehow Lecter's died, and that doesn't make sense. Yeah. With a stun grenade, it'd be a bit different. It's a bit more, ironically, a bit more flashy. And it's just, it's building tension, because we know what's coming by this point. As soon as that bullet goes into the back of the leg, we know what's coming. We know...
poor guy at the back of the elevator as the body drops down. It must have been nightmares for life.
And then obviously we switch back to the I was about to say the elevator, the ambulance.
And Howard Shore's music rises, let's not forget. I don't think it's a coincidence that Howard Shore also did the score for 6 or 7 years later, funnily enough. No, 4 or 5 years later. Yeah, that clarinet is...
And just,
lovely.
Just the way he slowly pulls the towel off of his head, slowly moves. Everything is calm. Nothing feels, like he's in a rush.
No. I'm telling you what, there is a deleted scene where you see the ambulance rumble to a stop in the tunnel, and then start driving off again once Hannibal has obviously taken control, a lot more calmly and straight. And then it cuts to him in the laughing and cackling behind the wheel. I'm so glad they cut that out.
That's when it becomes a little bit more Machiavellian villain. Now we're going to do, now's the scene where you explain why you've done what you've done, and it's the big reveal. That Agatha Christie type reveal would have just taken it in that direction, which all the reasons why this film works and why I particularly love this film is because it doesn't do that at any point.
Yes, exactly.
At all.
No, it takes it very, very seriously. And Harris, as the novels went on, just was just far too in love with the Hannibal character, I think, and took the public's affection for the character a bit too far, I think, and just I wonder, lost his bite.
I wonder how much was him wanting to do that, and how much was influence from publishers, because you can totally understand why, because as I said at the top of the episode, the thing that most people leave the theatre with is Dr. Lecter and Anthony Hopkins' portrayal. And it's because that character is so good.
Yeah.
The problem is, the reason why it's so good is because it's absence makes the heart grow fonder. We never get tired of seeing him because he's not on screen enough to get tired of seeing him.
Well, he's not in it again until the very end now, is he? So,
and that's where I suppose I would say the biggest change from the book to the film is, in the book he escapes and he ends up getting plastic surgery.
Yes.
And obviously changes completely the way he looks. And actually there's a scene similar to what we see in the closing shot where he's on the phone to Clarice. The difference is he has the conversation and then he says something along the lines of, you know, "You look nice, Clarice," or "nice," or whatever it is. I can't remember. But it just letting Clarice know he's near and he's watching, you know. And I think shrewd move for the film not to do that. One, because I think all that means is then you've got to put prosthetics if you're going to do a sequel, or you've got to recast. And they recast.
We see him in a
Manhunter
disguise at the
Silence
end,
of the Lambs,
but and I mean, in the novel, he's got 6 fingers on one of his hands. By the Hannibal novel, he's had to have it removed. So
and that's actually quite an important part in how he manages to escape.
Yes,
because he takes something from one of the guards with that hand, and obviously he's like, if I give him that hand, he'll be focused on that one.
Correct.
As opposed to my other hand.
I think it's when his hands are locked behind the thing. It's like, I'll just, you know, I know that I'm going to keep this bit of the ballpoint pen in my left hand or whatever, and just put my right hand at the forefront so that the officer is distracted by my weird hand.
And I suppose, whilst it's not necessarily a problem, it feels like the most kind of plot device character trait more than any. It feels like the reason he made him have 6 fingers is so that they could do that scene, or explain in that scene how he gets out. Because it doesn't really have any kind of bearing on anything else in Silence of the Lambs, at least, I should say.
Yeah. Although it could certainly, I mean, it would have worked without it, I think.
It's
the other thing that bugs some people is like, how on earth did he get that bit of the pen? And there's a very subjective look where, you know, Chilton is taunting him in the cell and Lecter is focused on the pen and telling us that basically he's going to get that pen. And everyone's like, how did he get the pen? And it's never bothered me, because you hear at the end Chilton say, right, get him ready, we got to go. You don't see him say it, it's almost an afterthought. And in the book, you do hear a little bit more about how they get him ready to leave his cell, and that it means part of it is having him face down on the bed, hands behind his back, and that sort of stuff. So it's obvious, you know, that's how he's got it basically, but that's always flummoxed people.
And I've always thought as well, it's Dr. Chilton. Like his arrogance. Yes,
that's what it is, and that works.
He understands Dr. Lecter and how you know, he explains to Clarice, you know, how you have to be incredibly careful. Here's what you've done to this girl, and you know. But his own arrogance and his own one-upmanship means when he's in the presence of Dr. Lecter, he lets things slack. You know, he's such a...
Well, in the book, you see him in the film, he's looking for his pen, he can't find it, and that's why. But in the book, Lecter's managed to get that pen a while ago from some other kind of guest or kind of agent who's visited, and who left it in there, or left it in the tray, that he's managed to cobble it together and sharpen it using the scuffed metal on his bed over months and months and months. But so it's a lot more streamlined and effective in the book. Sorry, in the film. I think, you know, the other thing is, I really want to see Chilton get that smile smacked off of his face. Don't quite get it, although
we don't.
The way that Clarice deals with him occasionally is quite satisfying.
Yeah, she's very, very astute in how to deal with him, and they obviously do. It's again slightly different in the book. There's the line where it says, "Oh, perhaps you could have said this in my office." Otherwise, he wouldn't have had to take it.
Yeah.
In the book, it's because he won't explain all of that stuff. All of the stuff that he explains on the walk over, he doesn't. He doesn't want to explain it in the office. But I mean, obviously, anybody listening to this episode will know that we absolutely adore this movie, and it was, widely received well. Obviously, it was a big hit at the Oscars. So it won Oscar for Best Writing Screenplay based on material previously produced by Ted Talley. It was nominated for Best Sound. It was nominated for Best Film Editing.
Given it for editing, yeah.
Yeah, it won the Oscar for Best Actor in a Leading Role for Anthony Hopkins, obviously. Jodie Foster won Best Actress. It won Best Picture, and it won Best Director. And going back to what I was saying about how it had all the recipes for not necessarily being that successful and not necessarily being a flop, but certainly not being quite as successful as it was. It's a sequel, second in the series, but it's a new interpretation. So it's a bit, at a time where that wasn't happening a lot. Nowadays, I only bring up Marvel because it's the one that most people can probably understand the analogy where, we're going to do this story from that particular character, and it may not be the first one, but it's a story in there. We kind of expect it. In 1991, it wasn't done an awful lot.
Yeah.
It won, you had no, bankable box office stars. It was following a flop. A movie that didn't do particularly well, almost went straight to video. So for it to not only be successful in terms of, from a money perspective and making its money back and, having a big domestic and worldwide gross, but to be critically received well to the point where it's won Oscars and whatever you think about the Oscars and whatever, usually it's a sign of a pretty decent movie, if not a very, very good movie. And at no point does this film feel like an Oscar bait movie. That's probably one of my biggest pet peeves of those films that you can tell are clearly made purely just to win an Oscar. I think, I can't remember the name of it, but there's a film with Tim Roth where he plays Sepp Blatter.
And
it's about
one.
The beginning of FIFA.
Yeah.
And that was very much, the marketing was very much like it was going to be, an Oscar worthy movie, and it was just panned, and I haven't seen it, but it didn't look particularly good. No point does this feel like that. It's quite a surprising movie to win Oscars because it's not the usual type. It's not
people
based on
say now, I mean, like, no horror film has won Best Picture since Silence of the Lambs, sort of thing. And it's only one of 3 or 4 films that has ever won those big 5 Oscars as well.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Only One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and
It Happened One Night.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's in a very, very elite camp of movies.
I mean, it wasn't well received by the gay community, the film.
I mean, don't get me wrong.
To an extent.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. Watching it in a 2025 lens, I don't think, I can't speak for, that community. I don't see it as being offensive in that way, but I can see how people potentially would.
It's because it's for a combination of reasons. I mean, the scene we're watching now, the famous Goodbye Horses scene, very memorably kind of parodied in Clerks 2, of course, and lots of other places. It's not in the book, although there are the things he does in the sequence, tucking his genitalia between his legs, that sort of stuff, is in the book, but not quite in this scene. I think it's such an indelible image, such an indelible sequence, that on the surface it looks like, so this is what the filmmakers believe, a transsexual or a gay person looks like or behaves like, and the stereotype of mental illness, that sort of stuff. Now in the book, and to an extent in the film, that is explained. It's explained that and in fact it's explained in the book almost to a fault, that he is actually not a transsexual. He is a sociopath who has try to be many, many things and imitate, almost like the Thing in a weird way. I mean, imitates people, imitates genders, and he has actually been rejected from the key plot point in the book, especially and partly in the film, is that they identify him because sex and gender reassignment centers have rejected him and his application because of his past crimes. It's not mentioned in the book, but in the film, but he killed his grandparents when he was 12 years old. He's had lots of other, so he's rejected because of that and because of his psychological profile. He is not a transsexual, and the film and the book talk about how transsexuals are actually very passive and not violent. But a lot of that, when Crawford visits the John Hopkins Center, which is the reassignment center, and has a bit of a confrontation with the doctor there, because the doctor doesn't want to have anything to do with proving that this serial killer is a transsexual. And Crawford is like, no, what we're saying is we want the evidence that he isn't. We want to look at the people who you have rejected. That was filmed. A lot of that is in the deleted scenes, but they haven't included it in this. And some people say, he, as indelible as the character is, we don't get to know a lot about James Gumb, especially compared to, Francis Dolarhyde in Manhunter and Red Dragon. And I think that's why I prefer Red Dragon, because you find out so much more about the psychopathy of the villain in that one. So, on the surface there, I can understand. I mean, this out of context, the image of James Gumb there doing his dance, Goodbye Horses, has become a very notable scene. And on the surface of things, to people who would take that as something to use as a tool to insult people in that community with no context and with no thought, and who are doofuses anyway, then obviously that's going to be something that they latch onto without realizing that the book and the film explain that it's not the case. Yeah.
And I think if, I sincerely hope this film is never remade.
No.
But if it were to be remade in a hypothetical situation, that scene, I think, would be changed or done in a different way, or at least you would get those bits from the book to
there'd be more explanation.
To explain that. I think it's difficult because I think there's an element of knowing, this came out in the early 90s, and whilst it's not excusable in any way, but that wasn't a topic of conversation as much as it is today. So it's understandable why they didn't think potentially that would be an issue to leave those bits out. And whilst for me personally, I don't see that as an issue, but that's because I'm not a part of that community. So I can understand if that community do find problems with it. And I suppose that is probably the only real criticism of the film in any way I would probably have is that element. I think it leaves itself open for that kind of discussion, doesn't it? As opposed to not nipping it in the bud and making it quite clear early on.
Yeah. But again, you can argue the merits of using it as a narrative plot strand or as a motivation for this villain, this character, but it is based on a lot of research and is based on actual serial killers. It's primarily Ed Gein who did these sorts of things. There's another Ted Bundy as well, especially the methodology of kidnapping women in the first place, using a fake plaster cast and pretending to lift something heavy to get attention. And there's another one, but there was a guy, I can't remember his name, but there was a guy who did keep women chained in a well and slowly filled it with water. Terrifying. So, and damn well that, Harris he's not come to this for fun. He's not come to this to like I say in the book, especially, reading it for the first time since a lot of these issues have become more and more to the forefront of what we talk about now as a society, those bits really stood out where it's explained about his pathology and how it's nothing to do with transgenderism or anything like that.
And I suppose in the book, the link between the moths and the character because of that explanation and because of that deeper dive into that character, that link becomes a little bit clearer. Here, I'm not saying this, but you could understand why people perhaps wouldn't understand why he has moths, why he's interested in moths.
Yeah.
You could understand that to a certain extent. But on Ted Levine's performance, going back to what I was saying about Anthony Hopkins you see all sides of that character. You see the charming side, you see the frightening side. Same thing with Ted Levine's performance. When he opens the door to Clarice Starling, the way he opens that door, and you look at him, and he's quite handsome. He's quite charming. He seems like he's quite welcoming in some ways. Obviously, he then says, sorry, she doesn't live here, and shuts the door. But then he very quickly has managed to say, sorry, I didn't quite realise, what the situation was or whatever it is. And you see that. And I think going back to that research element, in that the reason why we see this is because we've often seen killers as just out and out bad, out and out evil.
Yeah.
And you only see the bad parts of them. I don't know if it was the first, but it certainly feels like the first. If it's not the first, it's certainly the best to have done it, where we see all sides or more sides to the character. I'm going back to Dr. Lecter, where he wells up in the cell speaking to Clarice. We see that, and we see that there are multiple facets, and these are complex characters. It's not just, he's a madman who's on the loose, which a lot of films prior to and since still do. So, in terms of some potential castings, obviously we've mentioned a couple, and obviously people who have played the characters in different interpretations. You mentioned Michelle Pfeiffer for Clarice Starling. I don't think that would have worked. I think Michelle Pfeiffer's a great actress. I know you like her because she's in Grease too.
That's accurate.
Yeah. I feel like she's, if it had been Michelle Pfeiffer, I feel like that would have brought the sexuality of that character to the forefront a little bit more.
Yeah.
This was this is before Batman Returns, but you get that. And I'm not saying that Jodie Foster isn't a beautiful woman, because she is. She's just beautiful in a different way.
Yeah.
So I think Michelle Pfeiffer for me would have. I think it probably would have brought that.
She has a more of a Michelle Pfeiffer as a screen presence. Her characters seem to have a bit more of a confidence about them.
Yeah.
That Starling doesn't yet entirely have. Although I am thinking of Michelle Pfeiffer in Scarface, and in Scarface she is very good at someone who's a bit naive and innocent. But nothing. Yeah, I
feel like that would have brought that. There's insinuations about the relationship between Clarice and Hannibal. I feel like with Michelle Pfeiffer, that would have kind of subconsciously, automatically brought it to the forefront a little bit more. Don't get me wrong, I like Michelle Pfeiffer, but I don't think she would have been quite right for this. And perhaps it's because Jodie Foster is so perfect. So other names that were talked about for the role of Hannibal Lecter: Sir John Hurt, Christopher Lloyd. How discussed these people were, I don't know.
Yeah.
Dustin Hoffman.
No.
Patrick Stewart. I can see Patrick Stewart to a certain extent. Louis Gossett Jr., Robert Duvall.
Duvall would have been good, I think.
Yeah. Jack Nicholson. I think that would have been a little bit too jokery, in all honesty.
Yeah.
That's a psychopath, but in a different way. Robert De Niro, Kenneth Branagh, Derek Jacobi, Daniel Day-Lewis, Morgan Freeman, and Sean Connery.
Oh yeah, Sean Connery came the closest, I think.
I mean, I cannot picture that.
No.
In my, I mean,
well, Demme
I kind of want to see it. Don't get me wrong.
Demme talked about how it was actually basically down to Connery or Hopkins, and Connery was like the mainstream choice.
Yeah,
and he was what he was going to go with, but Connery said no.
He probably would have been the one. Okay, here's who we're going to sell the movie on.
Yeah, but Nicholson, 5 Easy Pieces, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Although the Joker, he had done far too much already to have
it's almost
retain The Shining, to retain any sort of mystery.
It's almost the thing of, okay, we're doing a madman. Well, we got to talk about Jack Nicholson then. And then it's like, well,
yeah.
Sean Connery for me, I just imagine that scene, you know, I ate some fava beans, nice Chianti, which is actually different in the book.
Yes,
He ate his liver with some
Aroni
fava
or
beans
something.
and some amabroni.
That's it.
I think I'm pronouncing that right. So I can't see Sean Connery. However, I want to see it purely from
we do see him in chains behind plexiglass in The Rock, I guess. That's the closest we get.
I think he made not similar. He was in a film called Just Cause.
Yes.
Which is kind of similar in some ways.
Yep.
It's not in a lot of other ways, and critically wasn't received very well. I quite like it, but it's not. Yeah. It's not a patch on this at all.
No.
Another name which I think was quite close at one point was Jeremy Irons.
That would have worked, I think, actually.
He turned it down because he just played Klaus von Bülow in Reversal of Fortune and didn't want to play another dark character.
I would have thought about De Niro.
Yeah, De Niro, you can see.
Was this before or after Cape Fear? Very similar time, wasn't
1990. So, probably filming around the same time. Was it a delayed release, or they released it a lot later? Because they released it in February, which is not a great time to release movies because it was released on Valentine's Day.
Yeah, they just buried it. It's like, there you go,
perfect
whatever.
First date movie, isn't it?
And then it won Oscars, I think, the year after.
Yeah,
and that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, the reason they delayed it is because it was produced by Orion Pictures, who I believe are the same people who produced Dances with Wolves. And they were like, if we release it at the same time, then. Not that they necessarily thought this was going to be an Oscar-worthy movie. They may have done once they finished it and were like, this is just really good. But, Dances with Wolves feels a little bit more in that Oscar camp.
Yeah.
If they'd have released that at the same time, obviously it wouldn't have won the Oscars, I don't think, or at least maybe not the amount of Oscars. There would have been a bit more competition.
Yeah, so they swept the board 2 years in a run, Orion. Yeah. It's a shame that, the way that kind of all ended, unfortunately, you'd think with those two, but they were releasing a lot of rubbish as well, unfortunately.
In the role of Jack Crawford, names discussed were people like Michael Keaton. Yeah, doesn't have the same authority.
Wouldn't have been that old then.
Yeah, I mean, this is a couple of years after Batman.
Yeah,
no. I think the problem is, after playing a character like Batman, and same for Jack Nicholson with the Joker.
Yeah.
You go into a role, it's Batman. It's the Joker,
Although he was great in Pacific Heights, playing a complete psycho. Did you ever see that?
No, I don't think
it's a great one. Michelle Pfeiffer. No, God, not Michelle Pfeiffer. Melanie Griffith and Matthew Modine. It's a very kind of yuppies in peril, kind of hand of rocks to cradle type thing. And they rent out their room to Michael Keaton. It's a good little film, actually. It's worth a look. But he's great psycho in that.
One out. Mickey Rourke was another name who we could have had in the role of Jack Crawford.
Not straight-laced enough.
Yeah. I see Mickey Rourke much more as a maverick.
Yeah.
The person who doesn't play by the rules.
Me.
Sorry?
Like me.
Yeah, exactly. Smash
I can't
that
be stopped.
System.
Right.
Exactly. You are a renegade, a law unto
You'd think
yourself.
I could be stopped, but I can't be stopped. Won't be stopped. This guy Pilcher. This is actually the moth scientist guys.
I really like that relationship.
Yeah, and it is played down in this film, but the book ends with them two having Pilcher and Crawford. Pilcher and Starling basically dating, and it ends with them in a cabin somewhere with his family, and she's curled up. That's the last image of the book, is her curled up, satisfied, no screaming of the lambs, and it's a lot. Here she's literally left hanging on the phone. Yeah. But a lot more unsettling.
And I believe Pilcher is the bulldog from Frasier, isn't he? Yeah. And
this stinks. This is total BS. Here it is.
Another name in the role of Jack Crawford was Kenneth Branagh.
Yeah. But again, I don't.
Just a different vibe. I cannot speak enough about how much I love Scott Glenn's performance. He's one who you could quite easily lose, and probably a lot of people do lose his performance because it is so understated. But in a film full of big characters, you need a character who is understated. So
I think they did this ending in wherever they are, this kind of Caribbean country, just like they did it as a bit of a cheeky sort of thing, because it is different, slightly different. I think he writes her a letter in the book,
yeah,
and so I like that she replies to him, "I can't make that promise. I can't make the promise to not track you down," because he's trying to give her the same courtesy. So that's good. That leaves it does kind of leave it open for a sequel, that's sure. But I think even Harris was probably influenced by the success of the film and everything. And
and I think as well with the ending, from an audience perspective, you do want to see a bit more, because you do want to, especially because he's following Dr. Chilton. You want to, at the very least, you want to see Dr. Chilton get his comeuppance.
Yeah.
And
I can't remember what happens to him in the book or the series.
I don't think it's mentioned. I don't think it really goes into it. I think it's just
I know Crawford is barely an afterthought in the book.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, just as a very quiet, chill, natural death away from the FBI.
And it's interesting because Frankie Faison, who plays Barney, is the only character other than Hannibal Rising.
I know what you're about to say.
The only actor to be in not only Manhunter, but the rest of the trilogy as well. He's in all three.
Yeah, that's right.
Red Dragon, Silence of the Lambs, and Hannibal, and he's also in Manhunter. Okay, in Manhunter, he plays a different character.
Yes.
He plays a fingerprint expert in that. But I really like that actor. Everything he's in, he's always a character that I like watching. And in this as Barney.
Yeah.
In Hannibal, obviously, his character is...
Isn't he in Banshee, the TV series?
Yes, he's the Barney in Banshee. Yeah. With Anthony Starr.
That's a great series, that is.
Yeah.
So, just relentlessly violent.
The only thing, I suppose, the only thing about his character, I don't know, is he's a bit of a throwaway character. Well, not a throwaway character, but he's not the focal image.
Yeah.
But he does get a bit more meat on the bone in Hannibal. But I don't know if it's the same in the book, because it's been a long time since I've read the
I think it
Hannibal.
is. And but he's the one who coincidentally sees them together at the end. I can't remember where. I want to say Argentina. I could be wrong. And is like mortified and horrified that they've become a couple. Yeah. It's interesting.
I do like seeing that Barney as like a good right through to the bone, and then when he's selling the items of Hannibal Lecter's, it kind of just leaves a little bit of a sour taste, albeit it is a great scene where he's selling the mask to Mason Verger.
Yeah.
And you don't know what's in the box, and then you get the reveal, and that's a great reveal for a sequel that was 10 years later.
Yeah.
And people want to come and see a bit more of this. So in terms of further watching, obviously, I think it's quite clear that we have mentioned the rest of the series. If you like this film, you kind of need to go and watch the rest of the series, and also Manhunter, a film which I think is somewhat similar, albeit not as good, that I watched the other day, is a film called Fracture, which puts...
with
Ryan Gosling.
Oh, yeah.
Where you got Anthony Hopkins. I'd never realised up until the other day when I watched it, he does do a really bad Irish accent in it.
I didn't notice. Maybe that's the problem.
No, it's really subtle.
Yeah.
Really, because he's Welsh, you kind of expect an accent anyway. But it's really like there's certain words where you're like, oh, you're definitely doing like a generic Irish accent there. Yeah, that's, it has some of the same elements. There's a lot of mystery. Obviously, one thing I like about that film is Anthony Hopkins starts out with, he's accused of murdering his wife. And he begins the process by seeming like he's a bit bumbly and he doesn't really know what's going on. And then you realise it's all part of his plan and he's quite calculated. So that's quite good.
Primal Fear.
Yeah, Primal Fear is a great film.
Yeah. I'd say as well, I mean, if you're...
less you know about that going in, the better. Yeah,
if you're... Yeah, great Norton performance, Edward Norton, great Richard Gere performance, actually.
Yeah,
really playing to his, the way his star persona really, really well. Quite a bold performance from from Richard Gere in that. And if you're interested in the psychology of it, you've got to watch Mindhunter, the two series of Mindhunter that are on
with Jonathan Groff.
And the Fincher regular, what's his name?
Can't think of his name, but
damn it, he was in Iron Claw as well.
Yeah, and he's great in that as Fritz von Erich.
Yeah, the 2 seasons of that on Netflix are fantastic. And then there's rumours that they're going to cap that off with a couple of films.
Holt
McCallany.
And Anna Torv as well, who I absolutely love from Fringe.
And the book I'd recommend, Public Enemies. They funnily enough, Michael Mann made a film of it with Johnny Depp and Christian Bale. But the book is not just about John Dillinger; it's about Bonnie and Clyde and all of those kind of outlaws from that time, and it's about the formation of the FBI.
Okay.
So that's really fascinating as well to see where that kind of comes into it. Obviously, Gina's influenced Psycho and Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but neither of those have the psychological depth of Silence of the Lambs, although they're obviously great in their own right. Yeah,
and one that came out fairly recently that I remember when it came out, it was being called 2023 or 2024 Silence of the Lambs, and that's Longlegs.
Oh, yeah.
Which is, I mean, it takes it very much into the caricature element and a lot more, what's the word I'm looking for? A little bit more Machiavellian.
Yeah.
But great performance from Nick Cage. Yeah. Utterly off the wall, batshit crazy. But it has, again, similar kind of psychological elements and strong female lead. So I think you probably would find similar things that you would like in that as well.
And if you want a decent parody, Loaded Weapon with Emilio Estevez and Samuel L. Jackson. Yeah. F. Murray Abraham plays Lecter, and the first time I need
to watch that. I love Lethal Weapon.
Yeah, the first time they walk up to his cell, and he's there, but in the film, in Loaded Weapon, he's bound like he is in the scenes in Memphis. He's got the whole and they can't understand him, and he tries to charge for it, and he falls over, and quite famously, and the way he kind of yells and screams as he's like as he falls face down. Oh man, you got to see it. It's a treat, that movie.
Yeah, another great parody. Well, is a sketch. Is the French and Saunders one?
Without doubt, they were brilliant, and Misery and Aliens as well that they did. Yeah, fantastic.
And obviously we're talking about that scene and the I ate his liver with some fava beans and a nice Chianti. Completely improvised by Anthony Hopkins. And if you were to tell somebody you were going to do that beforehand, you'd probably go, don't do that. It's ridiculous. And apparently, because I don't know how many times I had to reshoot it, but it was certainly something, again, one of the things that a lot of people remember from the film. It's the thing that's parodied the most.
Yeah.
I think Jonathan Demme got to a point where he's a little bit like, kind of annoying now, and you can kind of understand. Yeah. But it's just another example of how sometimes the most memorable things are totally improvised.
Yeah.
One that I can remember, going a little bit off topic, is the Bring Me Everyone from Leon with Gary Oldman. That was done as a prank.
Yeah.
Gary Oldman said, to the sound guys, I'm going to be loud on the next one. He just wanted to make Luke Besson jump. And Luke Besson went, great, Gary, we'll keep that one, Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Bury Our Bones with Cinema. We really appreciate you joining us as we deep dive into the world of film. Be sure to follow us on all of our social media pages to stay informed. You can find us on YouTube, TikTok and Instagram at Bury Our Bones with Cinema. You've been listening to Jimmy Murphy, Gaz Evans and Ryan Etherington. We will see you next time for more cinematic discussions and hidden treasures. Until then, don't forget to keep your bones buried in the world of cinema. And it will be a one-button job. do.
I have a terrible tendency to just swear without any reason. But if you're talking, when we're doing it, I still find it slightly distracting.
It's a bit weird, but I think it's a bit weird, but I suppose...
maybe if you listen to it back, see if it sounds... I was like, I'm going to have to stop it. You listen to it back,
It's a good job I observed that well, wasn't it?